So I got the Magneto cleaned up, and it's time to put it together. I have a new hardware kit from Flywheel Supply. I have a new set of points from Flywheel Supply, and a new condenser from Flywheel Supply. I cleaned up our armature here and magnets. Cleaned up the frame and the lower part of the frame. Got some gasket material and made insulators that go between the coils and the frames. And our coils themselves, these are in really good shape. They're definitely been replaced. This is actually the style coils you would find if you ordered a set from Brellman. I think I'm saying that right, Brellman.com. Also, this condenser that was on it would be the same style condenser you would get there. So all this has been replaced at some point. I did have to touch up some solder. It was not soldered very well. And soldered and heat shrunk the connectors. Pins there are great, but everything seems to be in pretty good shape. So we're going to go back together with it, and hopefully it'll work out. The one thing I did not completely clean up is I did not polish up the cover yet. I just did a quick sand on it, clean it up to get the, they had a coating on here. I think they clear coated it, and the clear coat turned kind of brown. Let's see if I can, and you can see some of it right in there on the sides where I didn't get, and across the top. But anyway, it was pretty tough to get off, so I just wire brushed it. And I will polish these up before I assemble them. I'm not going to put the covers on it today. I will install this cover, so I have the lead out tower, so we can test it. I do, what isn't on this table is I do have a new lead out tower also that I forgot to bring up here. But for now, I'm going to use the old one. It's actually in really good shape, but I'll use the old one to do the test with. So anyway, let's get started. First off, I want to test coils just to see what they're at on a good set. Alright, so if we go across the primary, 2 ohms. And these leads aren't very great. Getting about 0.7 is not horrible. Yeah, so about 1 ohm. If I subtract my lead resistance. Yeah, about 1 ohm on both. Not too bad. It is a larger diameter winding. The secondary is a fine winding, so it will be a lot higher. So one secondary point is here, and the other one is here. So we go across one coil. We're going to get 5,000 ohms. I don't know if you can, that shows up very well there, but yeah, right around 5,000 ohms, 5K. This other one, 5,500 ohms, so about 400 or so more. Not too bad. First step we're going to do is install the coils on our magnets here. So I got my insulator I made there. These 2 holes are for the wires for the condenser because it fits in this gap. Oop, goes this way. So these face up. I guess it's down when this is the correct orientation, but these face away from the magnets. These 2 pins on the back need to face each other. These contacts on the side face straight out. Now the pins on the back. Oops, let me get it a little further on there before I do that this time. there's this spring that goes in between to make a connection. So it's right there. That connects the secondary coils together. Oh, my spring popped out. Let me do it again here. Okay, we're there now. Now we want to make sure this is aiming out, because one of them makes contact with this, and the other side will make contact with the lead out tower. So, looks good. There are a couple wedges that were in here when we took it apart. These would see the coils kind of bounce around, but this will secure it tightly. And use tip of my screwdriver to tap them down. So I'm going to drive them almost flush with the top of the coil, because if they stick up, they'll interfere with this bracket. Okay, so our secondary coil connections are accessible. Now I'm going to test to see that I got continuity across here, to check to make sure I'm making a connection there. I want to make sure I didn't tear anything up. So we had 5K and a little over, so we should have a little over 10K. 10.5K. Let's turn a light on there, it might help. But we're doing good there. Make sure I didn't damage my primary coils while tapping them in. We're good. And we're good. Alright. So next up would be this insulator. This one's going to go two ways. It's got a square notch and a round notch. A square notch rides up here. The round notch is for the little tube that hold the points. So this side towards the top is going to be the front. Okay, so these will protrude slightly. I'll look through to make sure I can see through the hole there, make sure it's lining up, which it is. Alright, next, I'm going to go ahead and install this part. Go something like that. Because this gets a lot of vibration, I'll add a little bit of Loctite to it. Also, I'm going to use Loctite on these other four, especially because the threads are kind of rough in the frame. This part actually has pretty good threads, but it's high strength, but it is removable. Okay, now that we're tight with that, there's one thing I've noticed. Sometimes when you install this, it may not sit exactly flat and make contact with both. And if that happens, you just need to loosen these up. Usually tap on it until they sit flat and then tighten these down. So I wanted to put the armature on there before I did this, or before I tightened it down. Alright, next, now that I mounted this thing and slid the coils on, I just want to check to make sure there's no shorts to ground. So I'll just touch ground, touch leads, and we're good. Alright. Oh, you know what I meant to do? I meant to install a little point, upper point here before I mounted this because it's easier. But we could do it anyway. Alright, so a couple things here. There is two insulators here. So this white piece of plastic is going to go on the top. You have this insulating piece that goes in the bottom. So you would put the point through that way. Hold it without touching the point surface. I don't want to scratch that up. A lot easier if I did it ahead of time, but still works. Okay, so you put the plastic in, then you have a little brass washer. And then one of the nuts. Make sure it's centered. You can't really get a wrench in here to hold it, so I usually just something like this. I'll get some needle nose and not squeezing very hard because I don't want to offset it. Keep it centered. Don't want to get it too tight. Crack the plastic. That should work. Now we want to make sure that this point contact is not grounded to the frame. It is not. If it was, it would beep. Well, you probably can't hear the beep with this headset, but you can see it on the meter. So, yeah. We are good. Alright. Couple things here. Let's go ahead and install our condenser. I want to just test this condenser real quick. Might as well while we're here. It's 172 NF. So 172 nanofarads. Let's see what this when we took off is. 142. It's a lot bigger. Okay. I believe spec in the book is around 110 to 140, something like that. So we're still good. I'll go ahead and go with this one because it's new. We'll see. I may regret it later, but need to run these wires through the holes here. Guess if I made the holes bigger, that would have been easier, but okay. So there was a little piece, I lost it, but there was a little piece of paper that came with this. It said the black one would go to ground, which makes sense because it goes to the case of the condenser, and the blue one goes to the points. I'm going to go ahead and wire up both grounds right now. So one wire coming off of the primary on the coils goes to ground, and one condenser. It's the wrong one. That's what I was going for. Okay. Let's check that ground just to make sure. So basically, yeah, primaries go to ground, so we're good. It should read the capacitor to ground too. Yep. Alright. I'm sure checking as many times as I am is kind of overkill, but I just want to make sure I don't mess anything up here. I have to troubleshoot it later. Okay, so next these two wires will attach here, but also we need a large brass washer to go in between. So the washer will go down. Then we will do, since this one's not on a ring terminal, I am going to save it for last, but since the condenser has a ring terminal, I will go ahead and install it and get the nut started. Okay. Now I'll slide this one in between this washer and the ring terminal. Tighten it down. Alright, I think I'm there. Okay, now the question. What is that washer for? Notice it's bigger, sticks out some. So on the front of this box, there's a kill button. And when you press that button in, it makes contact with that washer to ground out. Now, when I had this before, that washer wasn't there, and I'd really have to push hard on this. If I push real hard, it would make contact. But that's because that washer is missing. So the kill button should make contact with that washer. Alright, next I want to install screws through here. Put Loctite on the threads, both sides, this and the bolt, because these threads were a little boogered. I want to make sure I get plenty. Also, something I noticed test fitting these bolts and messing around. They're a tad shorter than the originals, so we'll see. If I have issues, I'm going to replace them with the originals, throw them back in there. Alright, that is it for this part, technically, but we want to install the armature in the lower point set. So this is a little different than the one that was on it. Screw is different, but that's not a big deal. Point's a little longer. It's actually better because it means I can gauge more thread. There's a little groove cut in here. I don't know what that's for. Maybe one of these, there's a model that has a pin where this can't rotate. I don't know, but a couple things to start off with. This is loose fitting in this tube. It may not make a good ground in there. So, just in case, I took paint off of the armature here on both sides. And also this spring, I polished each end of it so it'll make good contact to this armature if it's seeking ground through the armature and it's not getting ground through here. Alright, so first off we'll put our screw on here. And this is a seat for the bottom of the spring. Slide the spring on and do that. That's all it does to mount there. So we do have to adjust the gap on this. Right now you can see it's not even touching. So there's a couple ways to do it. One way is to, let's see, get a washer. Oh, I forget the measurement of this now. 2/32, 1/32. I forget. But I did measure this one and it does match up. And I had two here. I'm not sure where the second one went, but one way you do it is you put two washers under the armature, one on each side, and adjust it till the points just touch. The other option, while it's closed, see, we're going to make a gap back here. So while it's closed, see this gap between this screw and the armature? It should be the same as the gap would be between here, or when this barely touches, if you have it set. So I'll throw the measurement for this up on the screen. I forget what the number is now, but that should do it. So now we need to lock it in place. So to do that, we need a lock nut here. We'll take our lock nut, hold our points and the screw. Try to just turn the lock nut till it makes contact. And now I can do it a little better here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this gasket material to hold this because I don't want to tear it up. Tighten the lock nut. And that should be it. Let's see where we're at. Yep, that is there. Okay, so this mag is put together except for the housing. Should be good to go. I am going to go ahead and just install this outer housing with a couple screws. You always want to make sure that tab's clean where it makes contact right here. And I forgot to put the lead out tower in here. Okay, just put one screw on each side. It'll be good enough for the testing. Yeah, I only had two here on the table, but that screw kit came with 4 brass screws for this. Alright, so my lead out tower is making contact. This ground, this case ground is making contact, so definitely good to go there. So let me get this set up in my very much makeshift Magneto tester. And then I'll be right back. Alright, here it is. Here's my Magneto tester. So I was going to weld one up, but And I decided this is quicker at the moment. I don't have any welding gas right now. I realized I left it on, so that's a bummer. But anyway, I'll make a metal one eventually. I guess if I continue to build these anyway. But essentially, you just put down, and that's it. And then you look for spark. So let's dim the light. Zoom in, see if it catches any. Sometimes the camera misses them if it's in between frames. And, sure some of those made it to the camera. Anyway, looks like a pretty hot spark. So there is something. I hooked my oscilloscope to this at one point, just to look at the primary waveform. One of my other hobbies is electronics, so I wanted to see what that looked like. And I was posting that online, and there's a guy on Facebook there that mentioned if you graph the points opening on an oscilloscope and your primary current, and make sure the points open when the primary current is at its peak, you get the hottest spark possible. So I'm probably going to do that at some point, make a separate video on it. But to basically change the timing on this when it's going to open, you would change the point gap a little bit. So adjust the point gap either way to do that. But that's a little beyond this video. This is just putting it together, hoping it works, and going from there. So let me give you a little sneak peek of what I was doing this afternoon before I did this. So father-in-law and I were doing a little bit of woodworking, building the cart for it. So it's all out of oak from a tree that fell at my parents' property many years ago, probably 6-7 years ago or so. But I didn't have any that was wide, any boards that were wide enough, so we laminated 3 together here to make that work. But should be pretty nice once we get some polyurethane on it. So all I have left on this motor to clean up is the block. And the flywheels. Everything else is ready. All the little parts are done. So hopefully this weekend I'll get a good bit going on that. There's a tractor show, an engine show that's in Williston, Florida that I want to go to. So I'm definitely going to take the tractor. And if I get this done within the next 3 weeks, this is going to go too. So we'll see how it goes. I'll probably do that before I post many of the videos, though. I got a lot of editing to do once I build this thing, but we'll see if I make it in time. On the next couple videos, we'll probably be assembling the governor assembly and the trip mechanism separately. Just put it all together, but not mount it to the engine yet. So what I want for assembly day is basically have this cleaned up, throw the crank piston in, put the governor assembly on, put trip mechanism on, head, just large pieces, right? So we can get this together pretty quick when it's time to assemble it. But that's the plan. So I'll do all that other stuff on video, sort of detailed like this one. And the assembly video, we'll get Chad back over here, put it all back together, and hopefully hear it run. All right, see you next time.